Welcome to the Wisdom of Show. I'm your host, Simon Bowen, and every week I'm speaking to the world's greatest leaders, thinkers, and entrepreneurs about complex issues and impactful leadership. Join us in the Renaissance of Wisdom. Well, welcome to the Wisdom of Matt Purcell. You know, we live in an increasingly complex world. People are buying into tips, tricks, hacks, shortcuts, superficial kind of tactics. And I'm really interested in the depth of wisdom that sits behind people that are great leaders, great stewards of what they do. And we certainly live in a world that needs more stewardship, deeper wisdom, better leadership, politically, socially, economically, commercially. And my guest today, Matt Purcell, has a really fascinating story that bridges both the business world and some real success in the business arena, but also some really deep work to help people that might be dealing with, bullying. How do people take care of themselves? How do people show up in a world that sometimes is maybe attacking them and gearing them? It's a fascinating story, and I'm actually going to ask Matt just to give us the, typically I'd read the bio, but I've watched him give a TED talk, and I think it's kind of interesting hearing him talk about the story because it's best to come direct from him. So, Matt, I'd love to welcome you to the talk, to the episode. And, I know that you're one of Australia's leading brand strategists. I know that you've co-founded a business school with one of Australia's most successful entrepreneurs, Janine Allis from Boost Juice. I know you're a musician. I've listened to some of your music. I like it. So you've got your finger in a lot of pies. And I also know that you've invested a lot of time and energy in developing the ability for people to almost, to basically almost have a means of verbal self-defense. If they're being verbally attacked, if they're being bullied, if they're being pushed down, that's an eclectic mix of things to arrive at. And I think it'd be really helpful, apart from, being Young Entrepreneur of the Year and those sorts of awards. I think it'd be really helpful for people to get a sense of where that comes from, because the story has informed it, right?
Yeah, that's right. I mean, yeah, thanks for having me on the show, by the way.
It's
And
a pleasure.
I love the name of the show, Wisdom.
Yeah.
Like the word wisdom, I don't think at all gets enough airtime in our culture. I think you're right. We have a lot of information where information is just general information is accessible, especially with AI right now. I think um, it's actually really important now to have really good
Yeah.
guides in every area like you're talking about. And as a kid growing up, I knew I was very different because I looked nothing like my parents. My parents looked like Bill Clinton and Hillary, like Clinton. They're Caucasian. And those who are listening to this and maybe not seeing me, I'm actually a full-blooded South Korean man, and my voice sounds like I'm a surfer dude from Noosa. Like it doesn't sound like anything how I look. So I got hardware that's Asian, but software is Aussie.
Oh,
That's
I
how I
love
say.
that.
So I mean, I was adopted as a kid. That's why I look different and I sound so Aussie.
Yeah.
And it didn't bother me at all until my parents split up when I was 6. And when that happened, it wasn't a a nice split, a separation. It was
Mm.
quite a graphic and informative, like very deep, like very no, I wasn't shielded from my parents. They
Right.
told me everything, and I hated it. And my mum was very poor growing up. Worked a couple of jobs, and I was bullied as a kid for my race, actually. So the same year that I was, my family separated, I went to a new school, and that bus I entered was a portal into a new universe of being a human boxing bag, and my bag being a football.
Mm.
And I was outnumbered by several year 6 kids and kept it a secret, didn't want anyone to know. And then one day they took it too far, started throwing me in whiz bins right on a busy highway. And that's the first time in my life where I felt like I was literally a piece of rubbish. And I think a lot of people, go through these situations. But when I was 6, that was a mark in my life. I was like, well, I'm by myself. Some people would have seen me, Simon, and thought, Matt's pretty self-reliant. Like he makes his own lunch, he washes his own clothes. He keeps to himself. He thinks quite deep. on the outside it looked like that, but on the inside it was just for survival and to recognize that no one's going to come and save me. I'm by
Mm.
myself. I can't bring a security guard on the bus with me. If I could, I would have brought my mum because she would have just her death stare would have just completely destroyed anyone. So, so yeah, that was my introduction to thinking and having to look after myself and of danger.
Sure. And so the year six kids were older than you, I'm guessing. And so obviously physical methods of protecting yourself and defending yourself weren't as available to you. So you had to think your way through and be able to almost, you talk about this verbal self-defense, but I guess at a young age, you were acquiring the skills of being able to influence, even in challenging situations. And you teach that now, and
Yeah,
you
we
equip
you
people
figure
with that.
things out through trial and error, and that's why you like listening to guides and mentors and people who have actually done the work. Generally speaking, the older I've gotten now, and I notice someone has a spider sense, they have this instinct about them that just seems really acute and really advanced. I automatically assume, and I ask them, "What thing did you have to go through to actually learn that? Like, what
Nice.
thing did you have to? What that must have hurt a lot to be able to be that." Alert. And that's where I learned. Like, when I was bullied, we have flight mode and we have fight mode. That's the only two options we have. And
Yeah.
when we don't have any training in between. So all I knew was to flight. Like flight mode was just hope that no one notices you and you might change schools, you remain quiet. And that is doesn't serve you because it teaches people that it's okay to keep treating you that way.
Mm.
And fight mode's not good either because you can't just Will Smith someone in the face if someone verbally says something to you, it just gets you in trouble. So my dad, to finish this story, like my parents found out about the bullying and they informed the teachers and the principal, and they stopped physically bullying me. And that didn't stop the words, but that's when the verbal abuse happened and it wasn't as detectable. So my dad put me in martial arts classes as a kid, and it's that part of the movie where you're thinking, yes, now he's gonna get payback. He's gonna, and I wanted to, and I did. I was looking forward to getting on the bus, and if someone said something to me, I'll win somebody or kick him in the head or something, try and do some move I learned at martial arts. And I quickly found out that that didn't serve me either. Fight
Mm.
mode was bad because it got me in trouble with the three P's potentially. One was the parents, second P was the principal, and you guess it, the police.
Mm.
So the in between section of fight mode and flight mode later on in life, which I discovered was actually verbal self defense. Before it gets physical, you can always question somebody. You can use your words and disarm them. And one principle I learned in martial arts, and I've always been a big fan of the philosophy of martial arts, is this old principle that says you can only fight the way you train. You fight the way you train. So that's about preparation. And it's not actually the marathon that's the hardest part to do or the game that's the hardest part of it. It's actually all the prep that goes before it that made
Yeah.
that game even good or bad.
Yeah.
So I learnt that young from a young early age. Whatever, if I'm in that moment, I'm in danger, my training comes out. We don't, there's a phrase that says, we don't default to our expectations and hopes. We default to
Yeah.
the level of our training.
Yeah. There's so much to unpack there. There's a few things that I want to unpack, and we haven't even started on the questions that I had already mapped out yet. So this is a fabulous conversation. I just want to go back to what you said about when you see someone that has a spider. I think this is great advice for everybody, not just for, maybe startup business owners, founders, senior corporate leaders, um, young people. That idea of when you see someone with a spider sense, see, a lot of people go through life with blinkers on and they don't really notice
Mm,
really clever people around them. I'm a big fan of mentors as well, but I love that idea of noticing the people that have a spider sense, because you can see that actually if you're watching for it. They just somehow they figure out the right thing to do in a heartbeat, or it almost looks like intuition or instinct, but it's actually not. It's
mm,
preparation and process. We just recently had Alicia Ferguson, who played for the Matildas, the Australian women's football team at 15.
mm,
And one of the things that she said that was interesting to me was, lead athletes, don't get too far ahead of themselves and look at the outcome. They focus on the process and the
Mm.
preparation, and that gets you to the outcome if you do that. I love that idea of you see someone with the spider sense. So the first thing people have got to do is notice those people. And the second thing is, what did you say? You want to ask them, what did you go through? What's the
What was the
pain?
cost?
What was the cost that gave you that? That's wisdom, right?
Mm.
That comes from having gone through things yourself. That's a piece of wisdom for everyone to lock onto. What's the cost? What did you go through to get that spider sense? And then this idea of preparation. I'm sure it happens to you when people look at you doing something, and not even when you're using your verbal self-defense, but say branding work, and you kind of go, what about this? And they think it's magical. It's
Mm.
really time served in the trenches, isn't it? It's time in practice, in motion, in flow. And I wonder if we just don't notice enough as we're moving through. So what I'd love to do is I'm just going to jump back into into some of these questions. And I sort of want to get into this idea of mentors, because you've mentioned mentors a few times, and I've seen some of your other material where you're talking about you've got some mentors. You don't have to name who those mentors were, but how did they come about? Did you go and find them? Did they just show up? And what kind of mentorship really was the pivotal stuff for you that, charted your direction in many respects?
It was my mum who identified, first of all, that I needed better influences in my life.
Yes,
Growing up as a kid, I was really struggling with my mental health as a
yes,
12, 13-year-old, and statistics in Australia show that kids around that age between 12 to 18 to 25 are the most at risk with radical behavior and are on the edge of life. Like suicide is the number one killer of young people. It's awful. So
mm,
that's a massive thing. So my mum recognized that I needed better friends in my world. So she said, through her power, you're going to join these groups. And it was youth groups, church youth groups. It was a mixture of sporting clubs, good guitar teachers. It was a
right.
combination of tribes. And then it's like when you taste water for the first time or you taste something that's really gratifying, you're like, you want a bit more of it. And getting validation and encouragement from people who are ahead of you is an amazing thing, because when you're a young person, you get segregated and put together with people only in your year group and only had as much years on the planet as you.
Mm,
So when you have people that are slightly above who are 18 and you're 12 and they're saying, you're cool, man, keep going for it, that speaks volumes. And it shortens the distance between your parents who are like 20 years older than you as a kid versus someone who's only 5 and you look up to them. So that's where it started, Simon. And then as I've progressed, like I got older from that encouragement, I really do believe that when the student is ready, the teacher appears. Like I
yeah,
think there was a famous story about a guy who had a very high success rate for helping people get off alcohol addiction. And he was on Oprah. And she said, "What's the secret to your high percentage rate? It's unheard of." And he said, one word, it's called selection. People have to want to change.
mm,
And I think Lane Beachley, he's a good friend of mine. She's a client of mine too, a very good friend. She says this so well. She says, discomfort and dissatisfaction is the precursor to change. So you got to be sick and tired of what you're being dealt with. You got to be absolutely over where you're at in your life before you want to change. It's either you want to survive or thrive. They're the only
mm,
two real, like I think, spectrums in life. We're doing things to get by, or we have to change to be able to thrive. We can't. What's going to get me there isn't what got me here isn't going to get me there. So
mm.
there has to be some type of dissatisfaction in your life, I reckon, and that's what happened to me. I just wanted to learn.
Yeah, there does need to be a burning bridge,
Mm,
that you cross. And actually, if the bridge doesn't burn behind you, people keep going back, to what was there before. So, and there's a lot of theory around change management,
mm,
and people are actually good at change when they choose the change.
mm,
People don't like the change when it's chosen for them, or forced upon them, which often it is in corporate settings and things like that. I'd love to dig into this kind of concept of wisdom um, a little bit. And I think of wisdom has this innate ability someone has to spot patterns that other people aren't seeing, you know, to recognize layers below the obvious, to, you know, not just see what's transactional at the surface, but what is transformational and then what is truly timeless, these things that never change. And I think wisdom is one of the cornerstones of stewardship, you know, take what's been given to you and return it with increase kind of thing. And I'd
Mm.
love to just go backwards and forwards with you a little bit on the whole idea of wisdom, because if I could create greater wisdom in politics, in political leadership, I'd love to be able to do that. You know, if I could create greater wisdom in some corporate leadership, I'd love to be able to do that. And, you know, who do you see as really wise people globally? And what is it about them that lets you know that they do have true wisdom, deep wisdom?
I think a lot of people that I look to that have wisdom are either dead, but they live through the pages of their legacy.
Yeah,
I think one of the true marks of wisdom, in my view, is the longevity of their results and how time is ultimately the ultimate revealer of if it's true or not.
yeah,
Wisdom is more than information. We know
absolutely.
lots of knowledgeable people
Yeah,
who you could go to and they're like a walking book, a walking, talking book, but their life doesn't reflect necessarily the level of their knowledge about a topic.
mm,
And I think that's where we've got to be very careful not to confuse knowledge with wisdom. Wisdom is, in my view, a wise person, say in business, is someone who you can tell they're wise because they've had to deconstruct the whole damn thing themselves. And
yeah,
they've actually, you know, they can reconstruct something back together again. So Janine, who's my business partner and a good friend, she can, the reason why she's so good at what she does, and she's actually wise in my view because she has results to show for it. She had to actually go through the levels from startup right through to regional franchising, right through to global, made all the mistakes along the way. She can look at anyone's business, not through because she read a book on it, but because she had gone through the levels of the game and knows where the big boss is
mm,
and how far to jump and how to reserve your resources. And she had sold her family home to start. She didn't pay herself a wage until she was, you know, 4 years into a business. These are all things that you can't sometimes access certain things unless you're all in.
yeah,
You don't deserve it. So like wisdom in a way is earned. It's not given in a way. Like in biblically, sometimes you can like the biblical version is you can ask God for wisdom and He can give you wisdom about a situation. That's tapping into the divine.
yeah,
But in the sense of work ethic and learning from, there's wisdom to be learned from other people's lessons that have gone through a journey. That's smart to learn from them or to learn from your own history.
yeah,
So wise people are very good historians of other people and the most about themselves. They're very good historians.
yeah,
And yeah, they know what to say, when to say it, and how hard or soft they need to say if they say something at all.
yeah,
And so that if they seem a little bit removed from it. They don't want to. Wise people have to have that balancing out. Just because I could doesn't mean I should. Um, yeah, so that's what I'm seeing, and that's what I've tried to. Of my favorite biblical character in the Bible as a kid was always Solomon, because he was given. His story was he received a vision and a dream. He was a young new king, and he was given the magic genie wish. Like, if you could wish for anything, Solomon, what would it be? He didn't ask for women or glory or anything like that. He asked, "Help me rule this kingdom well." And the angel said, "I'll give you wisdom because of that."
mm,
And he wrote Proverbs and all these things that a lot of rulers and principles of things are based on. So I think wisdom is I think it's the ultimate power you can have in your life is wisdom.
I absolutely agree. And you know, there's a difference between intellect and insight. There's you know, there's the difference between data and information versus understanding the nuances of what it might tell us. And it's three levels of problem, right? The known problem, everyone knows about it, everyone talks about it. The unspoken problem, everyone knows about it, but no one talks about it. And then
Mm,
the unknown problem. And you know, people with wisdom have unpacked all the way down to the unknown problem. And figured some things out. I love that. I love the story of Solomon. Imagine if the CEO of a large company, said, like, you've got one wish, and they said, help me run this company well. They'd probably be thinking, give me resources, give me great people, give me a unique selling proposition. They're probably not thinking, give me wisdom, right? But wisdom absolutely answers everything else. So if you think about branding, and particularly personal branding, I think one of the greatest differentiators in the marketplace is your depth of thinking. If you can think deeper about what you do than everybody else in the marketplace, that will show up in many ways. And often these sage-like people don't carry the same ego with them around what they do. There's almost a humility, but I'd love to lean in on your branding knowledge and expertise. We have a lot of people in our audience who are coaches, consultants, mentors, advisors, and we seem to attract the people that, don't want to be, the loud, look at me, but actually, like, I just want to be one of those sage type people. As you think about branding around this hot idea of wisdom, what sort of things are, popping into your mind as a branding expert?
Oh, so many, Simon. There's a massive problem at the moment with businesses right now, with all our channels that we have,
Yeah.
is that so many great experts out there that are the world's best kept secret.
Yeah.
They're invisible.
Yeah.
And 84% of millennials don't trust ads that come from the company that make them. That's a true stat from HubSpot.
Wow.
It was N-Tribe that just came up with research that said 90% of people don't trust influencer marketing now. They like user-generated content, which is more authentic, driven from the actual user, not actually a paid actor.
Mm-hmm.
Our obsession with reality TV and vloggers now on YouTube and all these guys have completely paved the way to make me believe that we are exiting the institutional age, where we blindly trust our institutions about the news, church, government. Don't just blindly trust them anymore.
Mm.
Have entered the age of authenticity.
Mm.
We care more about not just what's said, but who says it. Who's
Mm.
behind that company? What's their history? Now, what do they value? What do they believe in? We care more about those morals now, about the person. If you look at how many followers even Tim Cook has versus Apple, Tim Cook's not Steve Jobs, by the way, but he has more than double the amount of following than Apple
Yeah.
does.
Yeah.
And so does Bill Gates and Microsoft, and so does Elon and then Tesla.
Yeah.
So what I think about branding is actually quite deep. Personal branding to me is your identity. It's your professional identity, because people essentially don't buy from people who are invisible. You have to be seen, to be heard, to be chosen. It's as simple as that. So
Yeah.
I think personal branding is the marketing strategy right now that is going to help your business cut through, because it lends your company a personality and a story.
Yeah.
And we know that facts tell, but stories sell. That's what I
Yeah.
believe in. And so often we might use the name of humility to say, I'm not going to be the face of my business because I'm too humble for that. If you don't have a personal brand, you're an expert and a founder today. It's not humility. You're invisible.
Yeah.
Mm.
And humility actually can be a superpower. It's actually quite a position of strength done well. And it
Mm.
doesn't mean timid or, weak. And it certainly shouldn't mean invisible. I agree with you. If you think about all the great companies everybody quotes in management books for the last 30 years, right? So GE, Apple, Microsoft, Ford, etc. Every single one of them has a human in front.
Mm.
Every single one of them. Even GE had Jack Welch, and he was a paid CEO. He wasn't the founder, right? But they all have a face that people can connect to. Um, it's interesting, though, in today's world, Matt, the obsession that the business world has with, get yourself out of the business,
Mm.
turn the business into a machine so that you can lie on the beach and roll in the money and just have this I just can't reconcile with that, because as soon as the founder or the originator or the leader identity is diluted in the business immediately becomes commoditized. It's just another company. And so what, you know, how do you help people who have have a nervousness
Mm.
about putting themselves out there? One, what interested me was you talking about you have to put yourself out there to be a musician. So you got through your schooling and started playing music, and and then sport. You've got to put yourself out. You're actually putting yourself in front of people to be judged based on the thing. I'd love to get you to lean in on this whole idea of people judge anyway. We're up for judgment, and that means the judge is judging you, and the judge has a set of rules that they're judging you by.
Yep.
But then the moment you put yourself out there as a musician or an artist or an athlete or a business owner that's going to lead the brand of your company, you're putting yourself out there to be judged. And I'm sure people come to you, wise people with a lot to offer, and they have this fear about, well, what if people judge me? And I'm guessing you have to get people past that some of the
It's
time in
true.
terms of what you do. I'm interested in what you'd be saying to people who are listening to this going, I get it. I
Hmm.
got to get my personal brand out there.
Yeah.
My company depends on it. Thanks, Matt. Nice news. But I'm scared, I'm going to be judged.
Yeah.
What would you share with those people?
Lane Beachley and I had coffee our first time when we were discussing about engaging with each other for personal branding
Mm.
online. I remember it fondly. It was at a cafe in Manly, and we were sitting there, and we're getting to the point where she was like, "Yeah, I agree. I agree. I got to do this." She starts crying in public. She just starts bawling her eyes out.
Wow.
And I'm like, what did I say? And she's like, it's just I didn't realize that I'm so scared still of what could this could happen to me. Like what if people don't like me or blah, blah. I'm like, wow, I really appreciate you being honest with yourself, because I'm going to tell you, Lane, people will unfollow you. There'll be a certain percentage of people that won't like what we're going to do, and the biggest lie that is going to stop. If I was Satan, if I was your enemy and you were an expert in your field and you've got so much to offer, the number one thing I'd want to do to take you out is to put that whole thing of judgment in your focus. Be like, it's not okay to be judged. We have a problem with being judged. And I
Mm.
think it's complete doesn't serve you. Like, of course, people are going to judge you. You're an easy target. I'm an easy target. We got to know what we're signing up for here.
Mm.
There's going to be an opposition, regardless of if you're on social media or if you're just going to be playing through local face to face, going knocking on doors. If whatever level you want to play at, if you want to grow your business or make an impact, from as little as knocking on someone's physical door saying, "Hey, I want to offer you something," like we used to in sales. My goodness, you're
Yeah.
going to get judged and you're going to have a percentage of rejection. So it's actually bringing all that stuff to the forefront. Say, actually, yes, you will be judged. Let's explore that. Let's finish that thought. By who? By people who don't know me. Okay, great. What's so bad about that? Well, they could say mean things about me. Okay, is it true? But oh, some of it might be. And we keep following it down the rabbit hole. So I don't let you get away with, and I don't let you get away without finishing and completing the thought. It's a very stoic idea.
Yeah, it's a
To the
great.
point where you realize these people who you're afraid of judging you, they have no name, they have no face, and they have not earned their way into your life to actually consider their words to influence you in any way.
Yeah.
Because I say this quickly, Simon, if you're not defining yourself, you are allowing other people to define your brand for you. That's why we need to control our narrative and create and share our story honestly, so that when we're publishing content, publishing equals audience. If I publish something about particular topics and about a story and value, then I only want those types of people who resonate with that to follow me. Anyone who doesn't follow me, that's fantastic. Anyone who follows me who doesn't like my stuff, I tell them, unfollow me,
Mm.
go somewhere else, because this channel's not for you. It's cool, man.
Yeah.
Hmm.
There's something interesting about the business world. I just want to kind of bring focus to a couple of the things that you said that were just gold in that. If you want to have an impact, you've got to be willing to be judged. And there might be a direct correlation with the size of the impact you're going to have with your willingness to be judged. So
Mm.
if you have a low tolerance to be judged, you're probably going to have a small amount of impact. But if you have a high tolerance and willingness to be judged and accept what people say that might not be your audience, you're probably going to have a greater level of impact. And, impact, impact equals your ability to attract the right people to you. It's actually who follows you that determines the degree of impact that you have. So it's it's a little bit interesting, this idea um, that it's okay to have the people that like you, and then it's okay to have the people that don't. Somehow in business, certainly my experience with business owners that I meet is, they might like rock and roll music and they don't like punk and they don't like metal and they don't like um,
Mm.
whatever the new stuff is, kind of thing. And
Yeah.
but to them that's totally okay. Musicians are in their lanes, and I like the ones I like, and I don't like the ones I don't like, and that's fine. And yet, as a business owner, they want everybody to like their business,
That's a good point. Mm.
as opposed to, well, this is the lane I'm in. I'm a rock and roll business, and so the people that want to buy from a punk rock business aren't going to be my clients. What is it about the business owner's mind that wants everybody to want to buy from them, even the people that should never be their clients because it's just not good for their business or what they're trying to achieve?
It's one of the first things we teach in our business academy with Janine Allis is that you need to define who your audience is. And the music analogy is absolutely bang on, Simon. If when you're a musician, you actually can be a jack of all trades to begin with. When I was playing guitar and touring, a couple of tours with Jimmy Barnes and a few other bands, if you're a good enough guitarist, you can be good enough at playing most genres.
Mm,
But even as a musician, I've only got a certain amount of time in a week and so many things I can say yes to. So one night I can be playing jazz and one night I can be in an outfit playing rock and roll. But essentially, it's important to be able to, if you want to be the main man, you have to be able to choose what stage am I going to be on? And
mm,
if it's a jazz artist, I'm totally not insecure about playing in jazz bars and missing out, not even seeing as missing out on big stadiums because
mm,
I know my genre and my people and everything's going to serve this audience. And
mm,
that's why McDonald's doesn't ever sell jeans or shoes. And that's why KFC never sell pizzas, right? They stay in their lane. They are just as much a musician in their genre than an actual musician is.
mm.
So it's just about wisdom again. That's this whole point of this show is to be, first of all, ask the fundamental questions. Who's your audience?
Yeah,
Everyone. Wrong
yeah,
answer. Wrong answer. Yeah. What's your product? Who's your audience? And you got to do like, we go through sometimes of um, the Carl Jung characteristics. So what
yeah,
type of business are you? Personality are you?
yeah.
So there's so many exercises you can get clear on your identity. Again, it boils back down to who are you? Who's your company? And that when you know who you are, then you know who you need to attract and where you need to go.
Mm,
Versus when you don't know who you are, what do we do as people? We imitate and we
yeah.
copycat until we can figure out something that works. Whatever gets us the result then, and yeah,
But when you imitate and copycat until you find something that works, you're almost automatically undifferentiated.
yeah.
You
You become a
cannot be
project home.
differentiated. Yeah,
I call
right.
them project home personal brands,
I love
where
that.
I literally walk down a street and see a whole street of every single house is a Lego house with the same color. And listen, some people might be saying, "Hey, Matt, it's great to have a house." I'm like, no knocking a house, but they're functional, but they're forgettable.
Yeah,
And when you're in business, if you are blending in with everyone and not popping at all, that ain't serving you.
yeah,
And the whole point of branding is to actually be memorable.
yeah, yeah.
So when you copycat, you create a project home, and no one knows why they should go to you or not.
I love that. And you're functional but forgettable. And if you're willing to step forward, you'll become memorable to the right people. So I'm interested in your experience. You work with a lot of businesses, a lot of business owners. I have my own sense of what I think the numbers might look like anecdotally, but I'm interested in your kind of anecdotal experience of, how many of the businesses that you've worked with really have done that hard work of who's my audience and what's our lane, what's our genre, and how do we get ourselves to be the best at that, and so that people can see it, so that we're also happy to step forward. Kind of anecdotally, across your history of working with businesses, when they come to you, what percentage do you think have actually done that heavy lifting?
I think the ones who've had the biggest impact, they've gone to 9 figures or something like that. Like, for example, one of my favorite clients is MJ Bale. So
Mm-hmm.
they're Australian owned, they're really ethical in the sense of how they, if MJ Bale, if people don't know, they're an Australian menswear company and they
Yes.
make tailored suits.
Yep.
And they're not franchised, they're privately owned and they're all in Westfields across Australia and
Great
privately,
tailored suits.
great tailored suits, right? So I'm an
Yeah.
ambassador for MJ Bale, and I think they come to mind because they're very, very clear on their person, and it's all webbed through their imagery and their wording. It's almost like
Yeah.
they're a timeless gentleman without, and they actually aren't apologetic with that whole idea of being a gentleman.
Mm.
Chivalry is one of the first things that come to mind underpinning their tone. So they don't sway away from those values in their brand. And when you wear those suits, it makes you feel like you're more of a classier man. And it helps with the price difference because it's much more expensive than a Tower Cash or a
Yeah. Yeah.
JD. So
Yeah.
that's a great example. But to answer your question, Simon, I think the businesses that have grown the biggest that we work with are 100% they know who they are, and the people who are maybe at the 7-figure mark, just cracked the 7-figure mark, they have an idea, like they're almost there, but they just need a bit more reach and visibility. And people who, generally speaking, starting out, they need a lot of help. And 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 I think when you think about houses, my best mate's an architect, and he said that if you want to build a great home, it's usually about 10% of your budget goes toward the blueprint.
Mm.
I'm like, what do I get for that? It's like, well, we look into whole DA, the land, and how you're going to build it, why you're going to build it. So you walk away with a piece of paper and a document with some lines on it. And if you had $1 million, it cost you 100 grand. You'd be thinking that's a lot of money for some lines. But that whole blueprint informs everything else.
Mm.
So I tell people if you want to build a big, strong house, a brand, and it's going to be a $10 million brand one day, then you got to be willing to invest $1 million into it. Or if you want to build a 6-figure brand as a personal brand, you got to at least invest 10 grand into that
Mm.
to actually know what the hell you're doing.
Mm.
Because other than that, what are you going to do? You can't build a house. Um, you can't let the builder just build a house without being guided.
Yeah.
You know, so I think that's the big key there is get clear on your blueprint first, and just before you start building, do the work. One last story. One last story. When I worked with Lexus, I worked with Lexus for a campaign, and they work with a lot of agencies like ours, lots of them. And what we worked with Saatchi and Saatchi on this big campaign for Lexus, and they said, "Hey, here's the brand guidelines for Lexus. Read over it because they're really, really serious about who they are as a brand." I'm like, "Okay, whatever. 12 pages, 15 pages. It's 200 pages. 200 pages, as thick as the Bible." And it had Japanese philosophy in this brand guideline book. I was like loving this Venn diagrams and a whole bunch of things that not just the logo position and the colors. It had fully, we are not this and we are this. Do not put this here. Do not put this here. Because if they didn't have that document, they would be letting agencies put their grubby fingers over their image of their whole brand.
Wow. Was it Ikigai that they were using inside the,
Yes, that was. Yeah.
you
Yeah, you
know,
bang on.
so now I have no surprises about why Lexus is Lexus. You know, deep, deep thinking that they've poured wisdom into their positioning and market thinking. You know, that takes time. A 200-page document doesn't happen in 5 minutes. It's like when companies have the one-day workshop to come up with the vision statement. It is lunacy. You know, put a bunch of people in the room, we're going to spend a day, we're going to workshop and come up with the vision statement. Really? So, because that makes sense. I'm sort of interested in, before I let you go, we are kind of coming up on needing to wrap this up, but I'd love to I'd love to invite you down the path of just talking about resilience a little bit. And I'm
Mhm.
really thinking about younger people. Matt. Resilience can be acquired and learnt and practiced, and you're quite right. Practice prepares you. And I feel like we're increasingly in a world where we need to figure out how to equip people with a lot more resilience than we might be doing today. My parents grew up in a pretty tough time, some of them were living on earthen floors. They didn't have mobile phones. Some of the telegram was still the way you communicated back then. They had to do a lot of stuff. There was no fast food, and people labored most of the day, and I think that built some grit. I'm sort of interested in, because you have a story that allows you to talk about resilience. You clearly had a level of wisdom at a young age, whether you recognize it like that or not, but you were looking at things. And you had to have a level of resilience just to carry yourself through that story. I'm really interested in your thoughts and observations about resilience, and anything that could help particularly younger people think about how they can be more resilient.
Yeah, the first thing I say to young people, because one of my first businesses I had was a youth center. So we mentored hundreds of kids with music, academic, and mentoring. And so I was in the trenches for years, seeing young people, and being an adopted boy from South Korea and moving 13 times as a kid and being bullied and then getting through all that. I can speak to that. You're right. One of the things that young people need to know is you're an easy target. Don't wish that you weren't, just know that you are. As an adult, you're an easy target. If you're going to put yourself on social media, you are an easy target. So everything about you, from what you can see from your face to your weight to your height, can be labeled something negative. Right through to your interests, right through to your beliefs, right through to anything. Everything we see or hear of you is content for me to attack. So you're walking to the world where you can be absolutely attacked for those reasons. The question has to be not, will I be judged or am I an easy target? But what criteria are you allowing people to judge you through? So you need to, that's where beliefs are really important. That's where self-defense comes into play, like where value needs to be defended. So I teach people about how they're easy targets, and how the remedy to that is that there's a famous movie called 8 Mile with Eminem, a famous rapper. And the end scene is him against the king rapper in a rap battle. And Eminem goes first. And Eminem beats the rap artist to the punch with everything he could ever say bad about him in his rap battle. And the guy couldn't win because he beat him to him. We've got to do that for ourselves and have an alternative view to that. So it's like, everyone could say I'm Asian with a dumb moustache, with stupid hair and blah, 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 everything I can be on this camera. But then I need to go back over it with, is that fair? Is that true? What kind of book is that judging that through? And I need to look at it through another lens and be like, that's silly, that's silly. So that way I'm confident and certain I have a choice that that's not the only option to believe in. The second thing is, I need to be able to say that to young people, that you're valuable. You can't just say that you're an easy target without saying, hey, there is value to you. There's potential in you. And one of the things I say to people is, this shirt is completely lifeless without me wearing it. So one of the things I say to my daughters a lot as they're getting older, my eldest is turning 8 soon. And she says, oh, how do I look in this dress, Dad? And I said, you make that dress look beautiful. See the subtlety? So the dress doesn't make her beautiful. It's actually her that makes it beautiful. Because I tell kids, you're creators. The one thing that separates us from the animals is that we can create a couple of things. One is fiction and non-fiction. We create clothing, not just for function, but for fashion. We give we give dead things life. This table's dead. Everything, this whole, like, it's just all bricks and mortar, this whole building. But what gives it value is actually you and our attendance, our attention. So you can't give what you don't have. So therefore you are valuable because you give value to things. That's what I teach kids around Australia. And I have 9 modules in my social kung fu. This is the first iteration of it that's being researched by the University of Sydney. It'll be evidence-based in a matter of weeks. And I'm very excited about it because this is lost. You're right. I believe that young people, they're in a tough time and they don't know it. They're suffering in silence in a way, like they're online and that looks like they're connected, but they're disconnected. Mental illness is huge. It's an awful thing. So, what message do they honestly have access to that can give them the tools to make them think more of themselves and make things more more
Yeah.
realistic, and put them in an order? So that's my mission with Social Kung Fu, is to bully-proof Australia and to help make young people more confident through self-awareness and relationship with each other.
I love all of that. Um, I love the idea that, when people realize they put the life into things, facts don't bring contention. Um, you know, that's a bottle. That's a fact. We're not
Mm,
going to dispute it. It's not going to turn into anything because it's just a fact. But there's a lot of things that are just not truth. They're just perspectives.
mm.
And yet we take somebody else's perspective and then read it as truth.
It's
And
true.
so, that
Yeah.
idea of you have value, and so you need to be willing to be able to defend yourself and just don't interpret things as truth. I love that whole last commentary that you just went through. I'm going to bring it to a close, but I'd love to ask at the end. I just love to ask some fast questions, fast responses,
Yep.
and get two or three of them in. And I have some common ones that I asked, but I'm going to modify them a little bit
Sure.
for you because of some of your interests and things like that. So, if you could, the question normally says, if you could spend the day in the mind of any historical figure,
Mm.
who would it be and why? But what I really want to ask is, if you could spend a day in the mind of any musician, living or dead, who would you choose and why?
I think I'd like to be in Jimi Hendrix's brain. I think it's the reason why is because he didn't have people he could necessarily copy
Right.
that was already doing it. He was like the front. If there was a running race, he was at the front of it. He's burning guitars and he was doing some eccentric things and pushing things forward. So I was just thinking, what just going through your mind to inspire you to keep going down the direction you are when you're trailblazing, there's no path. It's
Yeah.
scary when you're going on an adventure and there's no path. It's just all wilderness.
Yeah. Yeah. Fantastic. And so, what song would best describe, where you're at right now with everything that you're doing? Your life right now.
Oh,
What song would best describe that?
there's a couple of songs. John Mayer is one of my favorite artists. He has a song called "Stop This Train." It's just about time just galloping away
Yeah.
and seeing your parents get old, etc. But it's just I'm at that age now where I recognize my mid-30s, and I'm like, wow, I got here pretty quick, and yeah, doing some things. I just want to make sure that yeah, I stop and smell the roses as I'm working so hard. Mm.
As someone in their early 60s, I can promise you it does not slow down unless you make conscious decisions about that, Forrest Gump was right. The roll speeds up the further in you get. And last quick question, if you could instantly master any other skill that you do not have right now, and it could be a social skill, it could be a physical skill, anything at all. If you could master any skill without practice, like you just bang and you've got it, and it's going to serve you super well, what would that skill be?
It would be building, physically building. I'm a creative thinker, so I build in my mind ideas and concepts and pattern recognition.
Mm,
And I have friends who are very good with their hands, mechanics, or they're building houses. And we used to rip these kind of guys off at school because they leave school early to do
mm.
apprenticeships. And we're like, oh, you can't cop it, can you? You got to leave school. But the ability to be able to create something with your hands that people live in,
Yeah.
or to be able to create safety and shelter is, I think, would serve me really well and be very handy with a whole bunch of things that you could serve people with.
It also builds a very strong wiring
Mm.
between what happens in the mind and what happens in the real world or the physical world as well, because you're turning thoughts into physical things. It's a great development discipline. Look, Matt, I could talk to you all day.
Yeah,
I think
same.
there's
Yeah.
so many things that we could talk about. I really want to thank you for spending the time, being so generous with your time. I want to thank the audience that have, stayed with us all the way through this episode. And I know there's, if you listen back through it again, there's so much gold, and we're just touching the tip of the surface here. And so, I want to thank Matt for sharing his deep wisdom with us that has come from actually doing, being one of those mentors that's done things and lived through things. And As always with these episodes, I'd lay down the challenge. Be one of those stewards in the world, one of those leaders in the world that thinks deeper, gets below the surface, looks for the timeless perspectives on things, takes a pause to really get to the root of a problem or an opportunity and have some serious impact in the world. We'll share some links in the show notes about Matt's business trainings and opportunities that he has in the Business Academy, his media company, and then of course the social kung fu, the work that he's doing to try and stop bullying across the country. And Matt, I just want to thank you again for being so generous with your time.
No, thanks for having me. It was really fun, really fun.
Absolutely, our pleasure. Thank you.